I have often wondered whether, especially those days when we are forced to remain idle, are not precisely the days spent in the most profound activity. In any case, it is very important to be idle with confidence, with devotion, possibly even with joy.
Mm.
That's Rainer Maria Rilke, and wow, does that quote challenge, well, pretty much everything our modern world screams at us.
Mm.
It sets the stage perfectly for our deep dive today. We've gathered quite a stack of sources, articles, books, research papers, all digging into something that feels almost radical today. The art
Mm.
and, yes, the science of being idle. Because, contrary to that constant be busy, hustle culture mantra, our sources are suggesting that maybe doing nothing is actually one of the most important things you could do.
It really does fly in the face of everything, doesn't it? The
Yes.
pressure is just immense. So yeah, our mission here is to unpack this whole thing. We're going to look back at the history, this kind of love-hate relationship we've had with idleness. Then we'll get into some really fascinating neuroscience, what is literally happening inside your head when you're not trying to tick off a task.
Yeah.
We'll touch on, believe it or not, complexity science and even the role of noise.
Noise. Okay, intriguing.
Yeah. And then bring it all back home. What's the actual cost to us personally of this nonstop busyness? What happens in your brain and your life when you just stop?
All right, let's start with that history. It feels like there's always been this tension, right? Idleness is bad. Idleness is
Yeah,
maybe good.
absolutely. You can trace it way back. Think about Homer's Odyssey, the Lotus Eaters.
Ah, right. They seemed happy enough just eating those flowers.
Exactly. Hospitable, content. But Odysseus, the ultimate CEO hero type, he sees them as a huge threat. His men forget their goals, their whole journey home.
Just to drag them back to the ship, doesn't he?
He physically forces them. It sets up this ancient conflict, purposeful action versus the seductive danger of just being.
And that narrative, that bias against just being, it just got stronger over time. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. You see the rise of the work ethic, figures like Martin Luther, who sort of incorrectly tied poverty directly to laziness. That created this really strong cultural bias, especially in places like the US.
Yeah, you see it in the short vacations, the glorification of busy.
Or extreme examples like karoshi in Japan, actual death from overwork. It shifted from being seen as maybe just unproductive to being seen as a moral failing.
But people pushed back sometimes. It wasn't always seen as bad.
No, there were countercurrents. During the Enlightenment, you had the idea of the noble savage, this romanticized view of people living outside industrial society. And Samuel Johnson, get this, published essays in a journal called The Idler.
The idler, I love that. That's making a statement.
It really is a deliberate choice. But then, boom, the Industrial Revolution hits and everything just ramps up. Frederick Taylor comes along with his scientific management.
Ah, the efficiency guy, measuring every little movement.
Exactly. Treating humans like machines, optimizing every second for output. It's basically the ancestor of all our modern productivity hacks, like Six Sigma.
And the word robot came out of this time too, didn't it?
Precisely. Carol Oppek coined it from the check for worker. It was a critique of that very dehumanizing approach.
Turning people into predictable units.
That was the goal. Max output, minimal deviation. But the idea of idleness, the value in it, it never fully disappeared. Our sources point to modern thinkers like Bertrand Russell.
In praise of idleness, right?
Yeah, arguing that this whole obsession with work being virtuous causes actual harm. He even noted the irony that, time management books often just make people work more.
That hits close to home, all these tools to save time, and we just fill it with more tasks. Who else did the sources mention?
Oh, quite a few carrying that torch. Christopher Morley, Tom Hodgkinson with How to Be Idle, Tom Lutz's Doing Nothing, Veronique Vienne's The Art of Doing Nothing, even filmmakers like Richard Linklater with Slacker.
So there's this persistent undercurrent saying, hey, maybe slowing down is okay.
Exactly. And technology, which you'd think would free us, often doesn't. That Romanian factory example is just perfect.
Oh yeah, tell me about that one again. Danish company, wasn't it?
It was. They put new computers in their Romanian factory. Suddenly, the workers could finish their whole day's quota by lunchtime.
They just
Left.
went home. And the Danish managers were completely baffled. They just assumed the workers would, do twice the work in the same amount of time.
Wow. The default is always more productivity, not more free time.
It perfectly shows that cultural bias. Technology enables leisure, but the expectation is just more output.
Which is a great segue. What is happening in our heads when we actually manage to step off that treadmill? When we're not actively producing, what's the brain doing when we're, staring out the window?
Okay, this is where the neuroscience gets really, really cool. Because your brain is absolutely not idle when you are. There's this whole other network that fires up.
This is the default mode network, the DMN you mentioned.
Exactly that, sometimes called the resting state network. And it was found, believe it or not, almost by accident, Marcus Rachel, back in 2001.
How do you accidentally find a major brain network? Well, he was doing pretty standard brain scans, fMRI, looking at people doing demanding mental tasks. He was mapping the areas that became more active.
Okay, standard stuff.
But he kept noticing that certain other areas consistently became less active when people were focused on the task. They quieted down.
Huh. So he wondered what they were doing the rest of the time.
Pretty much. He looked at what those areas were doing when people were just lying in the scanner, resting, letting their minds wander, and bingo.
They lit up.
Like a Christmas tree. This whole network became highly active during rest. It's almost perfectly anti-correlated with what they call the task-positive network, the one you use for focusing on external things. When one's up, the other's down.
So, wait. If we're constantly busy, constantly focused on external tasks, emails, meetings, whatever, we're actually suppressing this other network.
That seems to be the direct implication. We're actively shutting down whatever it is the brain does when we let it run free, so to speak.
Okay, so what does it do? What are these brain regions in the DMN, and what's their job when they're switched on?
Think of it like a series of major airport hubs spread across the brain. O'Hare, Heathrow, interconnected centers. They have a high resting metabolic rate, meaning they burn a lot of energy even when you feel idle.
So they're naturally busy places.
Very. A key hub is the precuneus. It's tucked away deep in the back, kind of hidden. It's involved in spatial stuff. But in the DMN context, it seems really central to self-processing.
Self-processing, like thinking about yourself.
Yeah, reflection, maintaining your sense of self, that first-person perspective. So when you're deep in a work task, managing risk or whatever, it deactivates. But when you disengage,
It revs up.
exactly. And the source suggests this is when you might get those insights about your own life. That moment of, how did I end up here? That kind of deep self-reflection seems tied to the precuneus lighting up in the DMN.
Okay, interesting. What are the other hubs?
Well, there's the anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC. It's kind of like a collar near the front. Normally, it helps detect errors when you're doing a task. But in the DMN state, it seems to be monitoring your subconscious.
Monitoring the subconscious. For what?
For potential solutions to problems you're not actively thinking about. It's like your brain is running background processes, scanning for answers below the level of awareness.
So letting your mind wander could actually be productive problem solving.
Potentially, yes. Then you've got the hippocampus, that seahorse-shaped bit deep inside. Crucial for memory, right? Especially long-term autobiographical memories.
Like remembering your childhood or that presentation last year?
Exactly. Parts of the hippocampus are active in the DMN, which is why mind wandering so often drifts to the past. You suddenly remember riding your bike or you replay a conversation.
And the source said this isn't just nostalgia, it's also about the future.
Right. The DMN seems to use these past memories and your present state to simulate or project potential future scenarios. It's future-oriented, too.
Okay, one more.
The medial prefrontal cortex. Part of the frontal lobe, again, high resting energies. This area is involved in really high-level thinking, making information available to your conscious awareness. In the DMN, it lights up when your thoughts turn inward. It's like the brain's internal surveillance system, reporting on what's happening in the deep recesses, essential for those thoughts that just pop into your head.
Wow. So putting it all together, when we're idle, when the DMN is active, our brain isn't resting at all. It's doing really important internal work.
Absolutely. Building self-knowledge, integrating memories, processing emotions, sparking creative connections, projecting into the future. It's incredibly busy.
And it needs that quiet, that lack of external demand to do it.
The sources use this lovely analogy. The DMN flourishes when you relax, let your mind wander. But it scatters like butterflies. If there's a sudden email alert or demand, you need to create the space for it.
That makes total sense. Trying to have a deep thought while your phone is buzzing.
Yeah.
Forget it.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned complexity theory earlier. How does all this brain stuff connect to, well, ant colonies and forests?
Yeah, it's a really thought-provoking connection the sources make. They argue that things like brains, but also societies, ecosystems, ant colonies, they're all complex, self-organizing, non-linear systems.
Okay, unpack self-organizing for us.
It just means that complex patterns and behaviors emerge from the simple interactions of the individual parts without a central controller. Think of an ant colony again.
Right, no ant queen giving orders for nest building.
Exactly. Individual ants follow simple rules, like follow that chemical trail, but the colony as a whole does incredibly complex things, builds nests, finds efficient food routes, even learns and adapts. Order emerges from the bottom up.
And the argument is that trying to impose rigid top-down control on systems like this is bad.
Often detrimental, yes. The classic example given is scientific forestry in Germany. They wanted predictable, efficient timber, so they cleared diverse, complex natural forests and planted neat rows of a single tree species, a monoculture.
Looked efficient on paper, I bet.
Totally. Easy to manage, easy to harvest, but then came Waldsterben forest death.
Why? What went wrong?
They'd stripped away the complexity. The resilience that comes from diversity, different species, soil interactions, natural pest control. By imposing this simple, uniform order, they made the whole system incredibly fragile and prone to collapse.
And the sources draw a direct line from that to modern management.
They do. They point to something like Six Sigma as an attempt to do the same thing to human organizations. It's all about reducing variability, striving for near-perfect uniformity, aiming for defects to be as rare as a Six Sigma event on a bell curve, like someone being 7'6".
Trying to make human work predictable and error-free.
But the critique is that it's often misapplied to complex human systems. It tries to stamp out the very variation that allows for creativity, learning, and adaptation. They mention 3M, for instance, after implementing Six Sigma, the rate of innovative new products actually went down.
Whoa, the efficiency drive killed the innovation it was meant to support.
Seems like it, because innovation often arises from unexpected variations, not from perfect uniformity. And then the sources look at the Foxconn factories as maybe the most tragic, extreme example of this Taylorist scientific management approach applied on a massive scale.
Yeah, the stories from there were just awful. The nets outside the buildings.
Horrific. Millions of workers treated purely as interchangeable parts, intense specialization, rigid schedules, constant monitoring, zero privacy, mandatory overtime. It was the ultimate attempt at top-down control over a complex human system.
And the result.
Worker suicides. The sources frame it as a kind of system collapse, a devastating revolution against that completely inhuman level of imposed control. Workers described it like a concentration camp of labor discipline. Reports found people working 7 days straight, no rest days.
It's a chilling example of pushing a system too far.
It really is. Complex systems, brains, forests, societies, they thrive near a state called self-organized criticality. It's the sweet spot, right on the edge between rigid order and complete chaos. It allows for flexibility, adaptation,
and relentless busyness, constant control, pushes us away from that edge.
That's the argument. It makes the system brittle, fragile, prone to sudden collapse like an oversteepened sand pile. Perhaps idleness, allowing for that internal wandering and self-organization, helps us return to that more resilient critical state.
So forcing constant output, suppressing our natural mental rhythms. It's like trying to turn a forest into a perfectly neat but ultimately dead lumberyard.
That's a pretty good analogy for the argument, yeah.
Huh.
And speaking of things that seem counterintuitive, let's talk about noise. You reacted earlier.
Yeah, noise being good. How does that work? Seems like the opposite of focus.
Well, there's this fascinating phenomenon called stochastic resonance. The basic idea is that in certain kinds of systems complex, nonlinear ones, like the brain adding a bit of random noise can actually help.
Help how?
It can amplify weak signals, making them easier to detect. Or it can improve the system's overall responsiveness.
Okay, I need an example. That sounds backward.
Okay, think about climate science. One theory about ice ages, proposed by Benzi, is that random fluctuations noise in Earth's climate system, combined with the regular weak signal of orbital changes, helped push the system across a threshold to trigger ice ages.
The noise boosted the weak signal.
That's the idea, or a visual one. Imagine a really faint, blurry picture. If you add just the right amount of random visual noise, sometimes the underlying faint image becomes clearer. Too little noise, you see nothing. Too much, it's just snow. But there's a sweet spot.
Okay, I think I get the concept. How does this apply to my brain or creativity?
Well, neurons communicate partly by synchronizing their firing patterns. Noise, counterintuitively, seems to help this synchronization process, allowing different brain areas to link up temporarily and form functional networks.
So noise helps brain regions talk to each other.
It can facilitate that coherence. And the source speculates about Rilke again at Duino Castle. He was blocked, right? Then he's walking near the cliffs in a fierce storm, lots of external noise.
And suddenly here's that first line. And if I cried out,
Exactly. The hypothesis through this lens is that the strong wind, the external noise, acted like that optimal noise in stochastic resonance. It amplified a very weak signal from his unconscious poem trying to emerge, allowing it to cross the threshold into his awareness.
wow, so the storm wasn't just dramatic background. It might have actually helped the idea surface.
It's a fascinating possibility, right? Noise facilitating, not hindering the creative breakthrough.
Are there other examples? Like research?
Yeah, there's interesting work on noise and ADHD. ADHD is linked to lower baseline levels of the neurotransmitter dopamine, which affects motivation and focus.
Okay.
Studies have actually shown that adding ambient noise, like white noise, can improve performance on memory and concentration tasks for children with ADHD.
Seriously, noise helps them focus.
It seems counterintuitive again, but yes.
Yeah.
One idea is stochastic resonance. The noise helps their brain process signals more effectively, maybe by boosting dopamine levels slightly or directly aiding neural communication. It's worth noting ADHD brains also show DMN differences, like faster oscillations.
And this isn't just for ADHD.
No, other research looked at creativity in general. Using tests like the remote associates test, they found that moderate levels of ambient noise around 70 decibels, like background chatter in a coffee shop, actually improved creative problem solving compared to quiet conditions.
So there really is a sweet spot for noise and thinking.
It fits that inverted U-shaped curve of stochastic resonance perfectly. Too little noise, not helpful. Too much, distracting. Just right, boosts creativity.
And the source ties this back to idleness itself, suggesting idleness might increase internal noise.
That's the really intriguing hypothesis, that maybe the state of idleness, of letting the mind wander without external focus, actually increases the brain's internal background noise level.
And that internal noise then helps the DMN.
Exactly. It could facilitate coherence within the default mode network, helping those different hubs connect and enabling those moments of insight, self-reflection, and creativity that seem to arise from doing nothing. Constant busyness might actually suppress this beneficial internal noise.
Okay, this is all fascinating history, brain networks, complexity, noise. But let's bring it right back to us, to the listener. What's the real, everyday personal cost of constantly pushing away idleness, of embracing this culture of busy?
Well, fundamentally, we're running Stone Age software on information age hardware, or maybe the other way around. Our brains evolved for a very different world. Things we take for granted, like reading, are actually incredibly complex and recent skills for the brain.
And multitasking definitely feels unnatural.
It is. Our brains are fundamentally single task processors. Trying to juggle constantly just makes us worse at everything, more stressed, and leads to what some researchers call attention deficit trait, or ADT, basically, acquired distractibility.
I feel seen.
Right. And it has real consequences, errors, accidents, huge productivity losses. That Intel study estimating billions lost just due to interruptions, it shows how much this constant switching taxes our system.
And beyond just feeling frazzled, there are serious health impacts from chronic busyness and stress, right?
Absolutely. It's like trying to run a marathon every single day without recovery. Your body and brain aren't designed for it. It leads to burnout, exhaustion, poor performance, and significantly increases the risk of major health problems down the line: depression, anxiety, heart disease, stroke, maybe even some cancers.
Wow. It's literally bad for us.
It really seems to be. You contrast that with evidence suggesting, say, Cro-Magnon people actually had more leisure time than many of us do today. And that period coincides with a huge explosion in creativity and art. Maybe that downtime wasn't wasted time. Maybe it was essential.
And what about kids? We seem determined to schedule every minute of their lives, too. Sports, music, tutoring.
This is a huge point in the sources. This trend of hyper-scheduling, the pressure to achieve, the constant digital stimulation, even things like academic doping with ADHD meds for kids who might not strictly need them, it squeezes out idle time.
And that idle time is important for them.
Critically important. There's a paper mentioned, Rest is Not Idleness, arguing just that. Children's brains need unstructured wandering time. That's when the DMN is active. And that's when they consolidate learning, process experiences, make sense of social interactions, and integrate it all into their developing sense of self.
So by keeping them constantly busy and focused externally, we might actually be hindering their emotional and social development, their ability to understand themselves.
That's the concern. If they don't get that internal processing time, they struggle to build that inner world, to make meaning from what happens to them. The sources point to data showing declining creativity scores in kids since the 90s, and also a shift towards a more external locus of control.
Meaning they feel less in charge of their own lives.
Exactly. Less personal agency. It suggests this constant external direction might be undermining their internal development. Idleness is where they integrate experience and build a self.
And maybe that explains why so many adults seem to almost fear idleness too. That quiet moment when the phone stops ringing.
Well, the sources suggest that's often because when you do stop, when the DMN activates and the external noise dies down, uncomfortable things can surface. Unprocessed emotions, difficult thoughts, anxieties that constant busyness helps keep buried.
So workaholism can be a form of escape.
It can be a way to avoid that internal landscape. But ultimately, facing that internal landscape, allowing that DMN processing, is the only way to really achieve self-knowledge and integrate those difficult experiences. It's necessary work, even if it's uncomfortable.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this all up. The big picture seems to be idleness isn't laziness. It's not empty time. It's actually a crucial brain state.
Right. It's when this incredibly important default mode network gets to work, doing vital jobs like fostering creativity, building self-understanding, processing emotions, consolidating memories, even planning for the future.
And this idea is supported by looking at how complex systems work. They need space to self-organize, not constant control, and even by the weird science of noise potentially helping signals emerge.
Exactly. It suggests these periods of less structured, internally focused thought are fundamental to how our complex brains operate best.
But our modern culture, with its deep historical roots in the work ethic and amplified by technology and economic pressures, pushes relentlessly against this. We're obsessed with busyness.
And that obsession comes at a real cost to our mental health, our physical health, maybe our collective creativity and innovation, and definitely to our children's development.
The sources really make you question the whole system, don't they? Who actually benefits from this constant drive for more productivity, more growth, often seemingly at the expense of basic human well-being? They bring up Adam Smith noting our natural desire for relaxation, Einstein saying our biology isn't easily changed, even Bakunin arguing true freedom requires freedom from this kind of dehumanizing work structure.
Yeah, it challenges fundamental assumptions about efficiency and progress. Systems like Getting Things Done, which emphasize offloading everything from your brain, or Six Sigma trying to eliminate human variability, maybe they fundamentally misunderstand what makes human systems thrive. Maybe that internal processing and variability aren't bugs, they're features.
Which leaves us, and you, with a pretty provocative thought to chew on. If our brains really are these complex, self-organizing wonders, wired to find balance, process life deeply, and spark creative insights during these periods of apparent inactivity, what are we truly missing out on personally and as a society by fearing idleness? By trying to optimize every single second, what potential lies dormant inside you just waiting for a moment of stillness to emerge?